Hey guys, and welcome back to another YouTube video. In this video I'll be going through the trade targets for round, what are we on now, 19 I believe. Let me just double check that. Yeah, round 19. Going through who I think are the best trade targets for this round, as we really look to get those high scoring guys, those last three guys in, the L3 high scorers in now, as well as also trying to look for that pod that you think is going to pop off and probably average 110 from here on out with 6 rounds to go. I think that's the sort of decisions that we want to be making. And so yeah, we'll run through those guys, as well as some injuries have thrown up some new potential roles and stuff like that, and how that's going to work. So before we get into the video, remember to like and subscribe, turn the notification bell on so you know when I upload, and let's get into the video. So as you can see here, I've just brought up this screen here with the most owned. Is this on 90 or 100%? Let me just check. 110, so 100. There you go. That's full screen for you guys. So as you can see here, my team owns quite a lot of the top guys, as most teams should. Dacos is like 60% owned or whatever. 65%. Jordan Dawson is 60.75. Gordon as well is so highly owned at 44%. Marshall Bontempelli I think is 26, so he's getting up there. I do think there is a warrant to get Bontempelli, but I also think there is reason to get guys like Steele ahead of Bont, as Steele will allow most people to at least complete their side if they're running low on cash. But for those guys in the top 5 to 10k, if you do not have Bont, I'd get him in immediately, as he's really been that type of guy that's blown away expectations. And his last 5 to 10 have been quite ridiculous. I mean, he hasn't dropped below 100 since his lowest scores were a 90, 92, 94, 99. That's a ridiculous season. And I mean, if he can get these 140, another couple of 140 scores, he might get his average up towards that 118, 119 and have a ridiculous end to the season. So he's definitely an option. Sicily, I don't think many people will trade him in after this 65, but he's coming up against Richmond, who I think will go a little bit small actually. I think they're going small because Lynch is out for the year. They don't have Samson Ryan, so they've got Soldo in there, and I think Miller as well. And their only key forward, I think it's Jack Revolt. So I do think they are going to go small, which will really help Sicily out. And we will know team sheets tonight. But I do think Sicily is definitely an option, even though he's got a 65 next to him last week. Still a 120 L3 and 117 L5 with a 65 included is ridiculous, even though he has come off basically a suspension in 4 out of the last, he's missed 5 out of the last 7 rounds or something like that. I still think he's of great value, as you can see here, and he did have a 49 against Geelong, but I still think there's great value there with Sicily. Rosie, everyone has at 60% I believe. Let me just flick over here. Yeah, 60% for him, so it doesn't really matter. Dan Houston, I do think, is a little bit of a red flag. I mean, he has done really well in his... he's had 3 tons in 4 games, including a monster game. I just think, don't they have a pretty tough schedule? They got Collingwood, Adelaide, Geelong, and Freo there. And also Giants are a tough, I think, schedule for him. So I wouldn't be picking up Dan Houston, as I just think he's going to go 90 or 95 for the rest of the year. So it might be a decent... He might stretch into that D6 option for those last 6 rounds, but I do think there's much more value, especially with him being, 825k. I think there's more value in going Wangadeen Malira, who can easily get 90 each week. Viney is actually an interesting one with Oliver Still. Apparently, as per today, I just saw a thing, someone quoting the press conference from Goodwin. Apparently, he's still 3 to 4 away. So 3 to 4 away with Viney having this stretch. You could go for him. I do think there is a risk, obviously, with Viney, but if you look at that last 5 of 116, last 3 of 116 as well, I think there is a value there. And so I think he is a good option. I just would be worried about these options here. I remember, I swear I said Viney's a good option around about this Collingwood game or this Geelong game, and he's actually paid out pretty well. So I do think there is a role there where he's going to get at least 90. But do you want a guy that's getting 90s with a chance of a 150 score, or do you want guys that are consistently going to get that 110? you'll have to wait and you'll have to make that decision. But I do think Viney is up there and is definitely a pod at 2%. Cogs, most people own at about 45, I'm guessing 47. Merritt is around that 25 as well. So Merritt is another guy that I think you should be targeting. Has this really enticing schedule and don't really think he's going to get tagged heavily too much. I mean, West Coast could tag, but what's the point of West Coast tagging at this point? They're not a decent side, to be honest, so there's not really much point in tagging. But you could see, I guess, GWS might put a tag on him, and North might, but I don't think they will. Sydney will just put row bottom on him. So I think Merritt is certainly an option. I also do think Parrish is certainly an option as well. Definitely a pod and a good scorer at that. 108 for the year, basically, and his lowest scores is an 83. So actually not that bad. Just had this injury concern at the middle of the year, so hopefully he actually plays out the year as he can score quickly compared to his points per minute is quite actually high. Then we move down a little bit. McCluggage, Bailey Scott, I think is actually... McCluggage I don't think is an option just because Dunkley is returning. I think I need to switch this back. There we go. Hopefully that didn't cause anything with the audio to stuff up. Bailey Scott I think actually is an option. And I don't think McCluggage is because of Dunkley coming back. I don't think McCluggage is an option. Dunkley is someone I'm going to target next week with the cash available that I have. But Bailey Scott, I think, is an option. He would be a massive pod, and I think there are better options in Parrish if you do want that guy. But I think Bailey Scott could sneak into that D6 role if people wanted it. And weren't too happy with a Stewart or something like that, you could go with Bailey Scott. But I'm just going with Stewart because I think most of the top guys are doing it. And I think there's, to have a guy like that where you can just sort of be like, this is what the top guys are doing. I can just hold that and not really worry about it. I think that's a better option. But Scott, I think, actually does go 100 for the rest of the year. So I think that he will probably outscore Stewart. It's just a problem of Stewart isn't my... really needed to go out until around 2 or 3 rounds to go. Sarong, I think, is high up on my list as well. 112 last 3, 111 last 5, and has his lowest score of the year of an 83, then 94, 97, and the rest of tons. I think he's of serious value. I think he will go big against, who does he have? Sydney. I don't think they'll tag him. I think he has a really good run as well, other than obviously Geelong and Brisbane will be tough, but I mean, has he played Geelong and Brisbane this year? He played Brisbane for a 94, and has he played Geelong yet? He played Geelong for a 125, so I think they're not really of too much concern for Sarong, so I think that's fine for him. Atkins, I think, is just doing a little bit more, and I'm not too certain why. I think he's just had a couple of huge tackling games here, huge tackling output games, and has actually got the disposals, so I wouldn't be surprised if when he lowers his tackling output, you really do see him drop in points. So I'm not too keen on Atkins. Gawn is a ruckman that, I mean, you could potentially do him if Brodie Grundy doesn't return and you see another massive output from him. But then again, you got Rowan Marshall who's putting up 130, so is it much of a difference getting Gawn at this point? I wouldn't think so. So I think he's going to be a miss this year, but could be a decent differential against people who have Romo and English. Or for people that haven't been able to get to English, if you wanted to get Gawn, I think that's definitely an option. Laird is out, so don't worry about him being in my side. That's just because I initially had the trade in. I'm looking at like Miller and some other guys. I posted on Twitter recently about that, and you can go check that out. So there's that. Myers and Lockie Neal are guys that are up here and just had some. I mean, Myers had a 104 and Neal and 75. I'm not looking at these guys. I think I'm willing to differential against Neal at this moment, being 21% owned. I just don't think without the marks he does terribly well. I mean, looking in here. 2 marked here for a 5 mark difference here. That's already 30 points, basically a 5 mark difference for him at the moment. 25 to 30 points, which is absolutely huge. So if he doesn't get the marks, he doesn't look that good of an output. And he's got Geelong this week, so I wouldn't be looking at him. Maybe later on and down the track you could, but not this week, I don't think so. Darcy out. Darcy's out as well, so you could look at Jackson, but I wouldn't necessarily look at it. So you're starting to, at this point, look at, are there any injuries for the rest of the home and away season that are going to massively open up a scoring spot? I actually do think Rory Laird being out this week can really actually help Keys out, because I think with Rochelle being out, I think Keys becomes that secondary midfielder, and they are playing Melbourne, so I think you will see a Keys to Petrarca matchup. I think those two will go in the middle, and it will be very, very interesting. I also think you could see a Viney and Keys on each other. So we'll just have to wait and see with that. But I definitely do think you will see, because I don't think there's anyone really in the back line for that's really a standout, because I don't think Keys will go to Salem. I do think he'll stick around the midfield and have a high midfield percentage this week. And I do think his scoring output will increase. And I guess this video is sort of coming to the end now, as we're sort of getting to the point where these guys aren't really of value too much. But the last guy here that I think people are talking about is Luke Davis-Uniacke. I think there's just a massive tag potential with Windhager this week. And then O'Neill could come back, but I don't think he will. So there's a thought going him against Eagles and playing him for the rest of the, I guess, year. And then using, getting to him for my sake, from Darcy Cameron or Himmelberg, and doing that. But we'll have to wait and see on that front. But I do think he definitely is an option in future weeks. I just don't know, with the tag of Windhager most likely happening, whether that actually occurs. And I don't think anyone will tag him outside of that game. So I think I'll bring him in personally after this game, even though, well, it is against the Eagles. So I do think Luke Davis-Uniacke is the guy to bring in next week. So that will probably occur. And we'll just have to wait and see what my other options are. But if I can potentially I might potentially do Davis-Uniacke and Sheasel next week, if that is possible, but we'll have to wait and see with break-even splits, etc. I still think Crouch is a decent option. Doherty, for those guys that don't have him, even though he's 20% owned, I still think he's a really good option. Plays the Eagles this week, won't be my captain, but is close up there. Anyone else really to talk about? I don't think so. None of these guys down here. Dunkley's back this week, so I think he does well, but I wouldn't be bringing him in this week. Let his price drop. It's going to drop, I think, 20 to 30k, and then you can pick him up for 950k and use him for the rest of the year in that forward. What's going to probably be, this will show my trades, but my trade doesn't really matter at this point because it was Laird and he's not going to be there. Dunkley's going to roam in that F3 spot at the moment, and you're going to have, if you don't have the 4 of Gordon, Taranto, the 5 of Gordon, Taranto, Rosie, Cornelio, and Dunkley by the next round, it could be interesting. So that's why I do think Dunkley will be coming in next round for me, but also you have LDU and Sheasel that you've got to look at. But other than that, if we look at the, quickly look at the rookies, you do see that I have brought in Paris, and I think he is the best rookie to bring in after that 57. I believe he's got a negative break even or thereabouts. If we look at the break even, we scroll down to the bottom, he has a break even of 3, and you got Harvey on 0, but that's too much money, I think, to spend if it's going to price you out of like Laird and other guys. Baldwin doesn't play, Constable doesn't play, Melksham doesn't really play or not high scoring enough, Wagner is sort of way too expensive, all these guys are too expensive, McDonald doesn't play, Woe Whedon is more expensive than Paris, so I wouldn't go for him, so I think Paris is the only option. It does mean that I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys from St Kilda out of the 30, and who would have thought that at the start of the year? But I do think that at least 4 of these guys are really good scorers. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter too much if you have too many St Kilda guys, if they're all going to score well. So that is basically the trade to targets video, if I switch back to the main screen there. And so yeah, that's the video for today, and hopefully I can get out my predictions, my AFL predictions, and then also my round, my preview for on the Friday. But yeah, that's the video, and I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks guys, goodbye.